Hey, Composite Gloves here. I'm wearing a hat, and today we're going to talk about critical listening, the ear specifically. Here is a picture of the ear. Now, this ear, your ear, it's a pretty complex dude. He definitely has like a lot of interests. So we're going to be talking about it specifically with critical listening. This video is focusing mostly, I just want to point out this fact. I want to keep videos, spread out and apart so that you gain information in a way that's not like mass overload. So at least I try to. Some of my videos are like not living up to that standard. But what it is you hear non-linearly. That's the point of this video right now, is that you hear non-linearly. What does that mean? Well, if I play a tone for you, let's break out some tones. And I were to keep them all the same volume, some would be louder than others. And I need to monitor this to make sure I'm not getting gypped of volume. So I need to go over here. I need to look up Fruity dB meter. Okay, so what we're going to do, we're going to do a little experiment here, right? So first, I'm going to play for you a tone at 60 hertz. So here's 60 hertz. That's what it sounds like. That's our volume. So we're just a little bit below 60 dB. Now I'm going to play a tone for you at, let's do 500 hertz. Remember that last tone. That tone sounds quite a bit louder. And now let's go up to 1K, 1000 hertz. That tone's a lot louder, but you see our volume is remaining consistent. This is what I mean by we hear non-linearly. Let's increase it to 5000 hertz. And that's actually, it's still in the window where our ear naturally resonates, sort of. With some of you guys, it may. With some of you others, it may not be. So this may be still pretty loud, but it is softer than 1K if you were to compare them. On most people. Maybe you're weird. Most people would certainly say that that is louder, though, than this. This is just higher in pitch. And then, of course, the final one, 10K. And now we're getting quite a bit softer here. So this is what I mean by we hear non-linearly. That we hear, even though we have the same frequency, different frequencies, but at the same volume, so different frequencies, same volume, we hear them different loudness. So a lot of times people will make charts referencing 1K because that is pretty much the loudest tone. It's usually the one that people go to as a reference tone, usually. And this comes into play in any number of places. But right now I just want to point this phenomenon out to you because we'll talk about what it means and how we can apply it later. Just know that you do not hear linearly. And so when you're in your car and you're driving along and you turn up the volume, there's a reason you do that. When you turn the volume up, you make the frequency spectrum fill up a little bit more. You begin to hear the lows and the highs more fully than you did before. Unless you have a weird speaker system. Like my car has this weird stereo setup that's totally messed with me for other reasons. And because I know about critical listening, I know about all these things, I know that I'm being duped for other reasons in my particular car. But in other cars, it's pretty safe. I drive a Camry 2012 and it's done some weird crap. I just don't even know why they put the speakers where they put them. It's just interesting choices. So anyways, yeah, so we don't hear it linearly. So lower frequencies and higher frequencies tend to go away. It's going to become a bigger piece later. Now let's get to the ear part of things. So this is going to be a really brief overview. I'm going to blow through tons of crap. I just want to give you a general overview. And then I'm going to be breaking this down into a series of videos where we talk about each piece and exactly what it does. I'm going to spend a lot of time on this simply because, or maybe not, I've done a ton of so much reading. You don't even want to know the amount of reading I've done. Like I even have all the pieces memorized, and that is totally not required of you, just so you know. You just need to know the ideas behind the pieces and what they do. That will affect your knowledge. But if you memorize all the crap as you go along, a big thumbs up to you. So if you're an anatomy person, this may be of interest to you because I'm not going to be looking at it from a loss hearing. Most people are either memorizing the pieces, just learning how the thing works on a general level, or they want to know about how it affects hearing loss. I'm interested, and you are interested, in psychoacoustics, the mechanical features, and how that changes the way we can hear. So on the basic level, the ear is a mechanical device, and it does eventually become, you could say, analog. Some of you guys may even push for digital when it gets to the electrical signal, but we're not talking about any of that stuff right now. We're talking about specifically the mechanical parts of the ear. So there's three main pieces. There's the outer ear, the middle ear, and the inner ear. And this diagram has everything labeled already, so it's not quite as fun, but it is a nice diagram. So we're going to talk about how the sound gets through your ear right now, but I'm not going to talk about all the specific pieces and what they do. We're going to talk about that in the next several videos where I break down things and what they do on a much more comprehensive level. But you got to have this in your head if you want any of it to sort of make sense. So you have this saying, I'm not sure how to say it. I'm going to butcher terms like crazy because I've done almost all of this through reading and some talking to people. And whenever they correct me, it's just these words are a little weird. I'm not sure if you say this as pina. I've also read that this is called the arculos. I don't know. I show people these words and ask how they think they should say them, and it gets kind of interesting sometimes too. But I know there are ways to say them, and if I hung around with biology people, I'm sure I would have all this down pat and be like an expert at it. But anyways, this is it. It serves to collect sound waves. So in my sound synth basics, I spend all this time on sound and sound waves and atmosphere and pressure and all this stuff. Go check that out if you really want to know how that works. So what happens is you have these sound waves. They get into your pinna. I'm not sure how you say it, but anyways, and keep in mind you have two of these that'll become really important later. But it gets to this. This will do two things. Number one, it allows you to localize sound through the dispersion of high frequencies. Don't worry about what that means quite yet. You will understand. And then the other thing is it directs sound, so it can collect sound and direct it into your eardrum. I keep wanting to like touch my ear because I'm talking about this right now. But anyways, it'll send the sound waves into your ear canal or your auditory canal. So it goes in there. And the auditory canal serves as a resonance chamber. So certain frequencies will resonate with it, and they'll actually get louder in this chamber, specifically for reasons that we'll talk about a little bit later. So they hit this thing called the tympanic membrane. That's a really cool word for eardrum. So basically the eardrum is this little membrane that goes back and forth when it receives pressure differences. Why is that? Well, that's because your middle ear is pressurized. So it's excellent at doing this. And you actually have this thing. It's right here. The eustachian tube, or however you want to say it. Anyways, this thing connects out to your throat, I believe. And what it does is it allows you to, it says opening at whatever, however you say that word. And anyways, what it allows you to do is, when you swallow and you adjust your ears, you're using your eustachian tube, you're adjusting your middle ear to atmospheric pressures. That way, when you go up into the mountains, you don't like pop your eardrum from there being too much pressure, because you can have your eardrum slightly off and that can be really bad for you. And so you have to make sure that you pressurize your middle ear. And so that's what this is for. So I haven't done like a crap ton of reading about that, but that's what it does basically. And so your eardrum reacts to this in one dimension. So it's important to keep that in mind, one dimension. It gets to this part where these three bones are. They're called the ocelles, something with O and a lot of S's. And basically, they're these three little bones. They have fancy names. I believe they're Latin. They're called the malleus, incus, and stapes. But you guys probably heard of them before. They're the hammer, anvil, and stirrup. I'm just reading the names up here because they're right there, but I do have them memorized. But anyways, what happens is they get here, and a little bit of physics goes on here. Sound gets amplified tremendously. But at this point, it's no longer a sound wave. When it hit the eardrum pushed back and forth, causing the bones to do a mechanical action. So there is mechanical action now. Parts are moving. It's no longer a sound wave. It has been transmitted into this mechanical action. A little bit of physics goes on here where things are smaller, and so it attributes to additional force in other places. Very effective, very cool little piece of stuff. Physics going on right here, but it is basically what happens is it gets amplified, I believe, about 22 times. And so the original volume in this mechanical motion here, and the stapes hits this thing called the oval window now, or the round window is a different deal. It's the oval window. It's not listed here, but anyways, it hits that and sends this thing into this little like snail looking thing. This is called your cochlea, and there's a whole bunch of stuff. It's even labeled your cochlea. We're not going to deal with semicircular canals right now, But if you really want to know, sound doesn't actually go in there. Those have like these tiny rocks in them, like little pebbles. And when you move around, gravity will move the rocks around and they'll hit different parts of cells. I believe they have hair cells. I didn't do extensive reading on this, but anyways, the rocks move around and they send off signals based on where the rocks are, saying what direction your head, what your orientation is. And they have 3 of them, and I believe they're for the 3 axes, X, Y, and Z. So that's the deal behind those. If you want to go learn more about those, it's great. It's not super important for our listening stuff though, so I'm not going to talk about it. As you can see, I didn't even spend that much time on it. I just looked at it. I'm like, oh yeah, that's not what I'm looking at. So anyways, hits the oval window, goes to the cochlea. Cochlea is this complicated thing that we'll talk about a little bit later. It's got separate chambers and there's different membranes in there. And basically what you need to know is that if you were to lay the cochlea out, there's this thing called the basal membrane that sort of separates it in half. And as the stapes hits this, there's a liquid that will move inside this membrane. And this basal membrane will move, causing another membrane called the tectorial membrane to move. And underneath this tectorial membrane, there are a bunch of little hairs. And each one of these hairs is, first of all, they're different lengths. Near the beginning, they are small, and near the end, they're much longer. And those, of course, resonate with the different frequencies. So these ones are high frequencies, these ones are low. And as the membrane moves, this liquid will peak at different spots, causing the tectorial membrane to move differently, causing it to brush against the hairs differently, and that will make certain frequencies get louder. These hairs, now there's 2 kinds. There's outer hairs and inner hairs. Outer hairs simply serve they basically flex. They're like little dancers. They flex, causing the motions in the liquid to get amplified. So they don't send signal, but your inner hairs do. Your inner hairs send these they're not actually action potentials. What they do is they do deionization. So they're charged and they have and the tectorial membrane is charged. And when the tectorial membrane hits this guy, it decharges. And it does this at a rate, I believe it can fire off at a rate of like 100 times per second. That might be horribly, horribly wrong though. So I don't know. I was trying to figure it out. But basically, it sends off a signal. The more of these signals that get sent to your brain, the more you hear. Now, I've read 2 things about this. I've read one, and a source that I trust far more, I read that it was a graded response, meaning that you can have different levels of electricity sent, and that can mean things. This is where things get a little blurry because I'm not sure exactly where to look to get some of this information, but so it can send off different levels of information. The other method is, some people think it's binaural, not binaural, it's binary, meaning 1 and 0. It's either on or off, but that'd be action potential. And I do not think that's the way it works, because your brain actually has a specific spot for each frequency. It's pretty cool. You can actually see what frequencies a person is hearing just by looking at their brain. So that's a whole other topic though. So anyways, moves these 2 membranes. These hairs basically at the end of the day are frequency selective. If this is all like way too much right now, I'm just trying to give you an overview of like why you hear the way you hear. And so it gets there, and what happens is these neurons attached to these hairs will send off little signals. I'm not sure if neurons is the right word, but anyways, these hairs will send off little signals, and they will get to your cranial, it's called the 8th nerve, the 8th cranial nerve, and it's this guy right here. It says cochlear nerve, and that will get sent to your brain. It'll go to this part on your brain stem called the PONS. I'm not sure if it's pons or pones or however you say it. Again, I've never hung out with people who talk about this stuff. I've just read it. And there it's processed. Your 2 ears are processed, some differences. There's a whole bunch of stuff that goes on there. We'll talk about it when we get to binaural fusion. And from there, it gets sent through a whole load of stuff. It gets a way more complicated at that point. We're not going to deal too much with that, but I will talk about some things that the brain does. I actually went out and bought a friggin' book just on that topic to try and get what goes on. And it is a friggin' complicated topic, but it is really, really cool. In it, they not only strive to say why we hear certain phenomena a certain way, but why mood in music, like why you like one piece of music than other than another piece and all these different things. So there's just a load of stuff that goes on in your brain that we are just I'm gonna put it on hold. That's like, I've gone far enough. Now you get, the sound waves come in, they go through the auditory canal, they hit the tympanic membrane, it activates these 3 muscles, gets into the inner ear, which the stirrup hits the oval window, it moves liquid inside the cochlea. Cochlea will move this liquid, it'll peak at different parts, causing this thing called the basilar membrane to move, which will move this thing called the tympanic membrane, which will move this thing. Not the tympanic membrane. Have I been calling it that? It's the tectoral membrane. Tectoral membrane. Dang it. So if you guys, I'm not going to redo this video. Screw that. So yeah, just so you know, it's the tectoral membrane. It's not the tympanic membrane. Anyways, gets in there, moves the tectoral membrane. That's what brushes against the hairs. There's actually a lot more that goes on in the cochlea, but we're going to just save that for another day. Hits these hairs. Hairs fire off not action potentials. They deionize, sending off signals through this thing called the 8th cranial nerve, and you will hear sound. So it goes to your brain, and then you process it, and then you hear sound. It's like weird after that. So that is the ear. If you have any questions about this, let me know. I know it's a lot to sort of take in right now. If I got something wrong, like for example, me saying tympanic membrane when the whole time, because that's this guy. This is it's the bass drum. It's the eardrum, the bass drum. That's the way I think of it. But that's the tectoral membrane inside your cochlea. So we'll talk about the cochlea in more detail later. So if you have any questions about this, again, let me know. If I got something wrong, there's a lot I just said right here. And so some of it, I'm being pretty straightforward in that I'm not like an expert. I'm just trying to pass on what I do know from my perspective, because a lot of this stuff is not like super clear. Like if you want to learn this stuff, they don't have like videos specifically for audio engineers on this sort of topic. So I just ended up reading just a crap ton of crap and put together a thing. Most profound sentence of the day. Again, if you have any questions, let me know. Subscribe and support me on Patreon. Got a Patreon now. And have a blessed day.